after Shabbos, since Shabbos we're in isolation, we can't come together. One of the things that I sorely miss is the farbrengens that we would have at Chabad Zirchen Kedoshim. And some of you are here with us who know very well what it is to have a wonderful farbrengen together on Shabbos. And that's definitely something that's missed. So the truth is, it reminds me of 1979, after the Rebbe had his massive heart attack in 1970, 78, 77, 79, 78, and into 78 and 79, after the heart attack, the Rebbe did not bring on Shabbos. He did after Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos. And for those who lived not in Crown Heights, for them it was a treat, because Shabbos you couldn't be in New York. You couldn't be by the farbrengen, so you'd only hear secondhand. It came after Shabbos. There was a hookup, as it was called, of live farbrengen, and I remember those very, very fondly. Especially in part of that time, I was studying in yeshiva in Florida, in Miami, and we were able to have the live hookup and hear the Rebbe's farbrengen, which we wouldn't be able to on Shabbos. So we don't have our Shabbos farbrengen with each other. So at least Motzei Shabbos we can come together and we could farbrengen together, we could share it together. So I see online more people coming, David, Enrique, and wonderful. So Motzei Shabbos is also a time for telling stories in particular of the Baal Shem Tov. And I think it was, if I remember correctly, the Rebbe Marash. Third point is that telling stories of the Baal Shem Tov on Saturday night on Motzei Shabbos is a segula, is a treasure chest, warehouse for one's livelihood, for parnasa. In these days, in these times, we all need a blessing for our livelihood. Most people are not working. Most people, have taken a dip in that area of life. So we definitely need the blessings. So we definitely need to tell such a story. But the Rebbe Marash, if I remember correctly, who today is his Yom Haledes, it's his birthday today. He was born in 18. I think it might have been 1843, but I'm not, or 1840. I don't remember precisely. In any case, he was the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Reb Shmuel, and once someone went to his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and said to him, I was saying how wondrous and how great he was as a young child. And so his father said, no, what do you want? He is Tiferes, Shebi Tiferes. Tonight we counted the Omer, the 17th day of the Omer, and the Omer is Tiferes, Shebi Tiferes. Tiferes means beautiful within beauty, or compassion within compassion, which is a very lofty level in the divine order of things. As compassion, to be able to have compassion is not only a beautiful thing, but a very deep part of the neshama that a person has to be able to attach themselves to in order that someone can bring out compassion for another. In any case, so he said, the Rebbe Marash, today it's his birthday. So he said there's three things wrong with this statement. What was the statement? That Saturday night, it's a good time to tell stories of the Baal Shem Tov because it brings one, a treasure chest, a warehouse of livelihood. It brings them, it's a great manner to bring livelihood into a person's life by telling Saturday, Motzei Shabbos, Baal Shem Tov story. So three things that are wrong with this. One is that it's only the Motzei Shabbos, anytime you tell a Hasidic story. Second wrong thing is it's not only the Baal Shem Tov to tell stories of the Baal Shem Tov, that it is a segula for livelihood. And the last and final thing that's wrong with this statement is that it's not only for parnasa, for livelihood. Telling a Hasidic story is a treasure chest in our lives for all sorts of wonderful things. All sorts of wonderful things. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to share some stories together. Okay. And some of the messages. And the type of stories that in particular that we're going to share are going to be stories that relate to what we're going through right now, the challenges that we're going through, and how to deal with those challenges as a result. So the first story is a story that took place in 1967 with a group of women that went from New York to Detroit for the annual Women's Chabad Convention. It was a midwinter convention in Detroit, and they had spent the weekend, Shabbos, and the weekend, and a couple of extra days, I think, thereafter, with discussions about things that are important for the women's role, things that are important for women in their duties as shluchos of the Rebbe, and just in general, the importance and the value of women in Judaism, which, by the way, in our generation, just parenthetically, in our generation, we see the value and the importance that the Rebbe gave to women more than any other generation. Not only in the fact that he, from time to time gave sichas, spoke to the women, just to the women. Every farbrengen, there was the men and the women at the farbrengen, in their respective places. But there were sichas that were just for the women throughout the year. And, many people feel that women have a second-class place in Judaism. For those who are Chabadniks, know that that's the furthest thing from the truth. As a matter of fact, women, and definitely including my wife, will say, "What are you talking about?" We're in the front seat. In any case, so here was this convention of women, and what happened was they were heading back home. And in heading back home, they confronted a problem. And what was that? A huge snowstorm. Huge snowstorm. So they rushed to the payphone to call to the Rebbe's secretary, the leader of the group, Mrs. Miriam Popak, who actually just passed away this past year. Her neshama go from strength to strength. And she spoke to the Rebbe's secretary saying, "Please tell the Rebbe we need a blessing because we're stuck here in Detroit." So I think it was Rabbi Chodakov, if I'm not, I think it was Rabbi Chodakov, I'm not certain. Rabbi Chodakov, he said, "Wait a moment, I'm going to discuss this with the Rebbe." I don't know if he said that. I don't think he said that, but he said, "Wait a moment." He came back and he said, "The Rebbe wants to know, what do you mean that you are stuck?" So Mrs. Popak took that in a very literal way and started to explain the word stuck, figuring that, I don't know what she figured exactly. It was very fluent in many languages, including English. What do you mean stuck? So Rabbi Chodakov says, the Rebbe, so she proceeded to explain. Says the Rebbe knows what it means, the word stuck. That's not what he's asking. How is it possible that you consider yourself to be stuck in a place? And I don't think he went into the explanation, but let me go briefly to explain. What the Rebbe was saying is that based on the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, that everything is divine providence, individual divine providence, as opposed to collective general divine providence. And therefore, there's no such thing as you are, in a place where you shouldn't be. You're exactly where you should be, where you need to be, and when you need to be. And therefore, as the Rebbe replied, a Jew is never stuck. She got the message. And then she went to the ladies, I think there were about 20 ladies or so, who were there, missed their flight. And they they took out candle sticks and candle lights, and they went around in the airport to inspire people to do the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. Now, simple story, but what does this simple story tell us? Very simple thing. Wherever you are, that's where you need to be. You may feel that where you are in that moment is definitely not where you want to be. No one wants to stay in an airport when there's a snowstorm and not get back home. But that's our personal feelings. That's our challenge. But we recognize, of course, that everything is precisely the way it is meant to be, and it was already planned that way in the machshava, in the mind of God before creation. That it will come a day in 1967 in a winter, in a wintry day, that a bunch of women are going to be eagerly wanting to go home to their families. Their families need them, absolutely. And therefore, in that eager anticipation, they're going to feel that they are stuck. We're never stuck anywhere. We're precisely where we need to be. And when we can recognize that not only are where we need to be, but we need to accomplish where we are. I think that's the other point that's very important. There's something that needs to be accomplished there in that moment of, so to speak, being stuck. That's one story. Share another story. A similar, bringing out maybe a different side of this equation, of this point over here. Just see if there's anybody here. Okay. Any questions? Okay, online, thank you for joining. Second story. This is a story of Rabbi Avram Glick, who was a young rabbinical student from Melbourne, Australia, and he married a teacher in Worcester, Massachusetts. This must be in, I think, the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And with the Rebbe's instructions, he was to join his wife in Worcester, Massachusetts, and organizing youth activity for Chabad there. That's what he was to do. And he was there for a few years. Came up, after the few years being there, a position that he could have in Melbourne, Australia. And he was very excited, wrote into the Rebbe, and he got the Rebbe's blessings to go to Melbourne, Australia. When they started to prepare to go to Melbourne, Australia, and he was very eager for this new position, the work that he was doing with the youth, even though he was still in Worcester, was declining. He didn't have the same heart engaged in it, the same passion that he had earlier. And he went into Yechidus, to a private audience with the Rebbe, and he lamented the fact he said to the Rebbe, I feel very bad. I'm, still got a little time that I need to spend in Worcester, but I just don't have the wherewithal to be able to engage because I'm kind of like 1 foot there and 1 foot in Melbourne, Australia. So how am I able to deal with this? So he knew it wasn't the right thing, but just because you know something that's the right thing, in your heart doesn't mean you could overcome that and be able to deal with it properly. So the Rebbe told him, and he told him like this. When the Jews were in the desert for the 40 years, they were in some places for a long time, and some places they were there only literally for a day. Wherever they went, they had a mitzvah to set up the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the tent of meeting, where God would come and speak to Moshe, or where the offerings would be brought, and so on and so forth in the Mishkan. If they were there for 19 years or for 1 day, they had to put up the entire tent of meeting. And the Rebbe explained, because even though it's only a stopover for a night, and the next afternoon you're going to be moving, you have to establish yourself there entirely for 1 day as like 19 years. There is, in that sense, no distinction. In other words, the service of God needs to be put up, the service of God needs to be completely erected, a formidable task to put up the Mishkan, with all the pillars and the tapestries and the furnishings and so on. It took thousands of Levites to do. But the sanctuary of God had to be set up, even if only for a single day. So the Rebbe says from here, this teaches us something, that wherever we are in life is not merely a station in life for the next part of the journey. It's not just about where you're going to, it's actually where you are in the moment. And it could be in that moment, the tent of meeting needs to be erected, because the tent of meeting, right, the oil is the conduit between heaven and earth. And therefore, when one understands that you should live life as if you're standing on one hand with your packed suitcase to go, and on the other hand, as if you're here in a permanent way at the same time. And that's what the Rebbe said in Yechidus. What does this mean exactly? Let's understand this. It's really, when you think about a great paradox. What's the paradox? Like, you're ready to move forward, you're ready to move on, and at the same time, you're not moving on at all. You're completely engaged in this moment right now, which is a huge, difficult task when you think about it. A huge, difficult task. Because either you are, 1 foot out, or good tovach. Welcome, Jason.
Good evening. Shavua tov.
Shavua tov. So either you are, with your headspace packed with your suitcase heading out, or you're not with your packed suitcase and you're just here in the moment. So the Rebbe says, no, you need to be both. How do you be both? Is because when you recognize that the neshama is a part of God, just as God can be reflected, can be found in the infinite, he can also be found in the finite. Just as he's found in the finite, he can be found in the infinite, which is a paradox. So we have a soul that's capable of also living paradoxically. that we can be completely ready to move. Our suitcases are packed and we're ready to move forward. And yet we're completely engaged in this moment as if we're going nowhere. And there have been another occasion, this is in this particular story, but I remember this Fabringen myself. I wasn't at the Fabringen, but I remember after Shabbos hearing it. I think it was in 1984 or something like that, a Shabbos Fabringen. I still picture after Shabbos hearing the Chazorah of the Fabringen. And the Rebbe said it in different terms, but the same idea. What was that? He was speaking at the Fabringen about Mashiach and the colossal change in the world of Mashiach coming and changing the world for good. Godly revelation in every aspect of creation. And then he was discussing exacting on a word in Rashi, taking it apart with several questions and minutia of detailed understanding of Rashi. And then the Rebbe said, on the one hand, we just spoke about Mashiach, and when that fills one's head, it is like an changing, earth-shattering, colossal change to all of humanity. That is like awesome beyond awesome. And at the same time, what are we doing? We are engaged in a very small detail in Rashi to try to take it apart and to understand Rashi's understanding in the Torah portion of the week. Where's your head? Is it in this huge, colossal changing of the world? Or is your head engaged in the small minutiae of detail of Rashi? In both. How's that possible? That's a paradox. You're right. How's it possible? That's the neshama. A Jewish soul has the capacity of noisei hafchim, as it's able, just like God is able to withstand, withhold, or incorporate two complete opposites, being found in the infinite and the finite. The Jewish soul has the capacity of doing things that are completely au contraire one to the other, completely unique and different one from the other. And they're not a contradiction. Does God want Mashiach? Yes. Does God want us to understand the Rashi? Yes. Does he want us both at the same time? Yes. What do you mean? How do you have that, in your being, in your head, in your heart at the same time? Okay. We're capable of it. We might not feel we're capable of it, but indeed we are very capable of it. All right. Indeed, we're very capable. All right. Should we continue with another story? Yes. Online, folks. Another story. All right. Actually, this story emphasizes further the point that we just made. There was, this is a story that's told Rabbi Simon Jacobson about his father. May he rest in peace. So many years ago, he was hospitalized before the high holidays. And his son went to visit the Rebbe before Yom Kippur to receive some honey cake from him. which was a custom that the Rebbe would give out before Yom Kippur and on Hoshana Rabbah. He would give out honey cake and wish everybody Hashana Tova Musukkah, a sweet New Year. Smiling, the Rebbe handed him a piece of cake and says, "Give this to your father, and may God bless him with a sweet and healthy year." And then the Rebbe continued earnestly and said, "Tell your father that when he finishes his mission for which he was sent to the hospital, God will set him free from there." Wow. Inspired by the Rebbe's message that was relayed by his son. So being in the hospital, he initiated conversations with the doctors, with fellow patients and others, spiritual matters, discuss some Jewish ideas, and to try to bring them closer to God Almighty and to Torah and mitzvahs. So the day after Yom Kippur, the Rebbe sent his personal secretary to visit the man in the hospital, Rabbi Jacobson, and his first question was, the Rebbe wants to know, have you completed your mission yet? That's his first question. Baruch Hashem, he got out of the hospital, he became well, and lived for many years thereafter. Years later, after his passing, actually, which is maybe a little more than 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, the family heard about one of the doctors that took care of him back then, and that he was deeply touched because he inspired him that time when he was in the hospital. And actually, as a result of that, he became closer to Torah and mitzvahs himself because of that discussion. So here in this story, the Rebbe brings out very clearly the idea of what it means to be in a place and to accomplish something that needs to be accomplished. In our first story, we told about the midwinter convention that ladies got stuck, Chabad ladies got stuck in their estimation in Detroit because of a snowstorm. And the Rebbe said, no, a Jew doesn't get stuck. And here the Rebbe gives a very precise instruction. You have a mission to accomplish there. What does this mean? So God forbid that everybody should be healthy. No one should have to go to the hospital. No one should have to go anywhere but to be gesund and well. Or for that matter, we shouldn't have to be isolated. We should be able to go and deal with our world in the way that we need to deal with it. But yet, obviously, these things occur because it's not about I go to the hospital because I need to get healed. God wouldn't send you to the hospital in order that you should just merely get healed. That's not why he needs you there. He needs you there for a greater reason, a more important, valuable reason. Perhaps the only way that some other person's life could be touched is, God forbid, because something happens to you and you can touch someone's life as a result of that being in the hospital. It's a very different way to reframe, God forbid, that someone isn't well. Now, I'm not trying to justify God's, plan for anybody that, God forbid, terrible things happen to them. And it's not for us to, I'm not questioning justify is not the right word, but I'm not here to play God's role. And I'm not here to take away the compassion that we should feel for people who are in a difficult place. We should have the compassion for them. As we spoke, today's Tiferes should be Tiferes. Tonight is compassion within compassion, Rebbe Marash's birthday. And therefore, yes, when someone is in pain and suffering, we need to be compassionate and feel their pain. Absolutely. But we're talking about for ourselves that when we have to go through something, if we can reframe it, the reason why I'm going through this is because there's something that God needs for me to accomplish, not merely my healing. Yeah, of course you want to get healed, but that's not what God sent you and he needs you to accomplish. You're there on a mission. So you imagine the what a mind a person can have and the capacity that we have, that we could reframe, God forbid, being in such a position, being in the hospital, needing our own recovery. And I know I'm here for a higher mission. Now, many things as a result of this. First of all, the consequence of this is you're going to have a much better chance of recovering yourself because of the healthy mindset. Secondly, the trust that you have in God as a result of that is enormous. That you know it's coming for a greater gain to come out of this. That's a great trust in God. And indeed, you come out of it and you have affected another person's life. That is, wow, an amazing, beautiful idea. So that's it, folks, for our stories for this Mitzvah Shabbos. God willing, we will continue next Saturday night, Mitzvah Shabbos. It might be a few minutes later because Shabbos every week is like about 10 minutes or so later, but we will definitely continue our Farbringen together. Let's see, online, anybody? Sylvie says hello from New York. Wonderful. So we will continue next week, God willing, our Farbringen. I want to thank you all for joining. Shimon Lee, Jason, and Sarah Malka, and Larry, and North Carolina. Thank you for being a part of this. And also everybody online that is there with us. Have a good tavach. A reminder tonight is Tiferes should be Tiferes, compassion within compassion, the 17th day of the count of the Omer. And we should have a wonderful week, a healthy one, a one that will bring the final redemption of Mashiach now. A good tavach. He will. Thank you.